I'm Sally Seltmann. I'm a singer-songwriter, and 2 months ago my first novel came out. It's called Loathing, and you can buy it in the shops or online. On my second trip to New York, I arrived in the evening. I was travelling light, just me, my small backpack and my guitar. I'd come all the way from Melbourne, where I'd checked in my large black suitcase that contained everything I needed for my 9 weeks of solo shows across North America and Canada. But when I arrived at JFK Airport, my black suitcase was nowhere to be seen. Not on the baggage carousel, not even in the oversized section. A stranger suggested I go into the small office beside the vending machine near the door to the ladies' washroom. I stumble over, barely awake after spending 20 hours or so squished up in my economy seat. I found the small, grubby office and reported my missing bag to a disinterested, unshaven, plump man who I guessed was Italian-American. "Just one big black suitcase," I told him. "Yes, it has a tag with my name on it. Yes, I checked it in Melbourne. No, I'm not staying in Manhattan. I'm staying in Brooklyn." I gave the disinterested Italian-American my friend's address in Brooklyn and my mobile number. He did some looking around and shuffling and rearranging of photocopied sheets of paper. While he did this, I gave his office the once-over, upgrading, or should I say downgrading it from grubby to filthy. He plonked the pile of papers down on his desk. "Can't see where your bag is," he said in a thick New York accent. He reached for his dirty mug, the inside so stained with coffee it looked like an artist had got in there with some paint and lined it with varying shades of brown. "We'll deliver your bag to you," he said, not even looking at me. "Don't worry, it'll show up. It's not lost. It happens all the time." Pretending to act all positive, I carried my guitar out into the stinky night air. I joined the line, and when it was my turn, jumped in a yellow taxi. We set off, and I enjoyed being greeted by the buzz and rumble and bright lights that radiated from every building, every street sign, every vehicle. The relentless honking horns and the outrageously dangerous lane-changing manoeuvres my taxi driver was making both reassured me that even though my bag was lost, I was in New York City. "Sparks ignite with every conversation in New York," a friend once told me, and I knew what she was talking about because I'd experienced it the first time I visited. It's what I've always loved about New York, the shared neuroses, the overanalyzing, the abundance of art galleries, the high achievers, the loud, expressive locals who burst into song and dance on the street, and those who go that step further and take it to the stage on Broadway. But that night, a major dampener had threatened to quash my tender feelings towards New York. Why wasn't my bag at the airport? Did someone steal it? Will I ever get it back? What outfits did I pack? When the taxi driver pulled up in front of my friend's brownstone in Brooklyn, my worries began to dissipate and my mind settled back into the present moment. "I'm in New York," I remind myself. "I am in New York." My friend was away on holidays, but she told me her flatmate would be there when I arrived and she'd let me in. The downside to this, I wouldn't see my friend. The upside, I'd have a room to myself. When I rang the bell, the super snappy New York born and bred flatmate greeted me at the door and made me feel right at home. She didn't notice my lack of luggage, so I didn't mention anything. I climbed the almost falling apart staircase into my friend's room, thinking to myself that I'd take a shower, borrow some of her clothes, and wait for my suitcase to arrive. After I showered, I stood in her room with a wet towel wrapped around me, admiring all the photos on her wall. "Ah, there she is. Ah, that's an old photo of us from a few years back. Look how tiny she is compared to me." I suddenly snapped out of my nostalgic hazy days with the realization that I should have had this one very important revelation way back at JFK Airport when I first realized my bag was missing. One, my friend is tiny, meaning her clothes are tiny, meaning nothing of hers is going to fit me. And two, her feet are massive, meaning her shoes are huge, meaning none of them are going to fit me. So I changed back into my now smelly outfit I'd worn on the plane and hung out in my friend's bedroom with all her tiny clothes and massive shoes. Luckily, my black suitcase was delivered to the door the following morning. But believe it or not, that wasn't the only time my luggage didn't arrive into JFK Airport at the same time as I did. It happened again when I travelled to New York with Sarah Blasco and Holly Throsby to record our debut Seek a Lover Keeper album. It was August, middle of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, and I knew it would be hot, so I'd packed my suitcase full of fun floral dresses and basket handbags. When we arrived at JFK and made our way down to the baggage carousel, Sarah, Holly, and everybody on our flight collected their suitcases. I stood waiting beside the belt until there was nothing on it but a few scuffs and scratches. It's at that point that I realised once again I was suitcaseless. But being so experienced with the whole missing baggage situation, I hardly batted an eyelid. "Don't worry, they'll deliver it to our apartment tomorrow," I told the girls, sounding all peppy and positive. Sarah kindly told me I could borrow some of her clothes. Wow, amazing, I thought. I love her dresses and she has impeccable taste. After a few days of rehearsing and preparing to record while wearing Sarah's beautiful dresses, I was still without my suitcase. I kept phoning the airline and they repeatedly told me they had not located it. But I wasn't worried because I knew my bag would show up, like last time. But after 5 days recording in New York without my suitcase, the novelty of wearing someone else's clothes was starting to wear off. Also, our recording schedule was so tight that I had no time to buy myself something to wear. And by this stage, the hot and humid New York weather was really starting to get to me. All the sewer and pollution smelt so potent, and waiting for the trains on the underground platforms with all the other hot bodies felt like we were taking part in a performance art piece where human-sized hors d'oeuvres were being reheated in a large oven. I hate New York in summer, I thought to myself one morning while walking to get my coffee. We were staying just off Mott Street, and every morning I'd wander down its vintage boutique-lined pavement, noting all the closed signs and chained-up doors. I'd buy a strong, disgustingly bitter takeaway coffee and wander back up Mott Street, where I'd look into every shop window for a second time, hoping that for some crazy reason they would now be open. But no, the vintage clothing hotspot was torturing me. Every single shop was only open when we were off recording. When the girls and I arrived at the studio that day, Holly hinted that my missing suitcase dilemma had indeed been going on for too long. She mentioned that things were starting to feel a bit single white female. You know that psychological erotic thriller where Jennifer Jason Leigh's character cuts her hair short and dresses exactly the same as Bridget Fonda? I felt unusual. Holly went on saying she kept looking over towards me thinking I was Sarah, and then would turn to Sarah and think that it was me. It was about 3 days later that my bag was located and delivered to our apartment in Manhattan. I was so relieved to finally have my suitcase and all my beloved things. Unfortunately, this meant I had to downgrade from Sarah's wardrobe to my own. But thankfully, I did find a new love for my blue suede wedges and my stripy tight dress and my sweet little basket bag. And besides, now Holly could look at me and quickly determine who I was. I eventually had a day off from our recording schedule, and it was with great pleasure that I wandered into one of the gorgeous vintage clothing shops on Mott Street and bought myself a beautiful pink floral scarf. New York, with all your faults and flaws, your spark and brilliance, I love you.
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.